I guess we are live. So, hello, Home Assistance friends. My name is Kees Schollaart, and I am super excited to be here the next 15 minutes with you to spend some time looking at how Visual Studio Code can help you to work with your Home Assistant configuration files. My Home Assistant journey started roughly 3 years ago, and a lot has changed ever since. I remember still vividly this file editor that the early Home Assistant releases already had. I guess for a lot of you, this is also where your first YAML editing started. So when I was editing in this editor, I thought that could be easier. And I guess great minds think alike. Paulus, almost at the same time, tweeted out this tweet from the Home Assistant, the developer Twitter account, where he reached out to the developer community to see if we could make a tighter integration between Visual Studio Code and Home Assistant, because he envisioned that Visual Studio Code could make it easier to work with Home Assistant configuration files. So I replied, I said I would give it a try. And that is now roughly 2 years ago. And ever since, a lot has happened. We have a super good and cool, I believe, extension for Visual Studio Code that can help you in working with Home Assistant configuration files. It took off quite a lot. I'm super excited about it. A lot of people have contributed to the code base and to the extension, and thank you for that. There are now almost 40,000 installations. I guess after this session, we're going to reach the 40,000. That's what this session will be about. We are going to look into the 3 ways you can use Visual Studio Code together with Home Assistant, and then I'm going to quickly share some of my experience in working with a lot of configurations while building this Home Assistant Visual Studio Code extension. So, enough slides. These are my slides. So let's switch to Visual Studio Code. Let's see if I'm still live. Yes, all looks good. So, Visual Studio Code. I assume that most of you have seen this. This is a Visual Studio Code installation on my Windows laptop, where I have it opened in my files are on local disk. And if you haven't installed this extension already, you can install it using the extensions pane. You search for Home Assistant, and there we have an entry for Home Assistant. You hit install, and you're basically good to go. Most of the features work after that already. So when you open your Home Assistant configuration folder, you can open a file, and then you will see in the bottom right corner, it detects its Home Assistant as a language, and most of the features already work. So when I started building this extension, I first started with the navigation. I think it was an idea of Paulus that it could be easier to move around between files, because people tend to split up their configurations, of course, in multiple files. So much like a lot of programming languages, we now have a go-to definition, allowing you to navigate between files if includers are used. So here I can go to definition, and I'm brought straight into this particular file. Now, another thing a lot of people do is using this thing called include dir named. And this allows you to basically include an entire directory. And I use the concept of packages. And the packages allow you to kind of bundle a lot of related similar things. So I thought it was handy to have a lot of things centered around areas. So for example, I have my attic here I'm at now. And all the things for Home Assistant around my attic are in this file. Now I'm going to use this file to showcase some of the other features. And for that, we're going to make a very quick automation here in my attic. So I have here a IKEA trot-free remote control, and we're going to make this button turn the toggle the lights here. And with this demo, showcase some of the features. So starting with snippets. A snippet is a piece of code that you can very quickly inject. So I type some similar text. So in this case, automation, and it's going to populate some of the most used properties or attributes for this automation. So I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to give it an alias, HA conference. I'm going to remove the condition, and then and now I need to add a trigger and an action. And much like creating the automation, I can also use snippets for this. So let's say I want to have a trigger. I'm going to add a trigger for the state. I hit tab, and again, bam, there's my YAML code. Super convenient. And that brings me to another cool feature of the extension, and that is that you can connect your Visual Studio Code instance with Home Assistant, so that you get additional, let's say, features available. And that's, in this case, I would like to be able to work with the list of entities I have in my Home Assistant host. So what you have to do for this to work is to set something in the settings of Visual Studio Code. So you go to the settings of Visual Studio, and there you're going to search for Home Assistant. And as you can see, you have to set the host name and a long-lived access token. And if you do that, Visual Studio Code can connect to Home Assistant and do some additional stuff, such as, for example, I can now search for entities. Oops. So I can do 0x. As you can see, just by typing a few characters, I get an auto-completion list with all the entities I have in my Home Assistant. I happen to know that this has some characters in it that I know where to look for, but if I now hit tab, it just completes with this entity ID. I'm going to remove these for time's sake, and now I'm going to add an action. So we know when to trigger. That's when this entity button is pushed, and we have to toggle the lights. So again, we're going to use a snippet. And in this case, we want to call a service. And also for services, we have auto completion. So I hear a message. Let me check. I can make the font bigger. Yes. So I can search for all the services that I have in my Home Assistant instance. And so here I have the light, and I can also, I believe, click here and see even all the things that I can pass as arguments towards this service. And then, of course, I need to point to a light. So here I light, static, something with the ceiling. Yeah, there we go. So here we go. I've already created my automation. Now I see some red squigglies here. So I'm gonna mouse over and see that we also have schema validation. So it knows that an ID has to be of type string instead of number. And as you can see, we have also here all the other properties that we can set on automation, making it very convenient for you to discover new things to do. Now I am going to save this. I call this demo. And while this is pushing towards GitHub, where I store my configuration, I am going to explain to you another feature, which are commands. So if you hit Ctrl-Shift-P, that opens the command pane. And here you can also interact directly with Home Assistant, so that you don't have to leave Visual Studio Code that often. So in this case, I'm going to restart my Git pull add-on, and that will trigger my Home Assistant host to pull the code towards to pull the code. And I don't even have to go to Home Assistant. And with a similar command, I can also reload my automations. I might have done it a little bit too quickly, but let's see. So by now, there we go. I created an automation without leaving Visual Studio Code and still feeling confident that I haven't made any mistakes within my YAML code. So that is the first part of my demo. Now I want to kind of zoom out a little bit. And for that, I'm going to switch to here, because from a high level, we have 3 ways you can work with Visual Studio Code and Home Assistant configuration files. The first one you already saw, that is an installation of Visual Studio Code on your laptop or desktop. And the second one, the third one, are hosted versions, meaning that you don't have an installation of an application, but you are using Visual Studio Code from within your browser. Now, a super cool add-on made by Frank has been made to also allow Visual Studio Code to run on your Raspberry Pi or any Home Assistant host. So you install the add-on, and it creates an item in the left menu called Visual Studio Code. And if you click it, then within your browser, you can work with your configuration. It is connected with Home Assistant already. It is pre-configured with the extension, so you can just use it straight from the box and have like auto completion and everything you'd like. Interesting. There it is. So yeah, that is the second way of working with Visual Studio Code and your configuration straight from within Home Assistant. And the third one is actually it's actually quite new. It is a new feature from GitHub, which allows you to create a an ad hoc development experience. They call it code spaces. So what you can do, you can go to your Home Assistant configuration repository, you click on the code button, and then open with code spaces. And it opens up this Visual Studio Code instance with some, it logs you in, you can sync your settings, it has some disk state persistence, and it opens right your Home Assistant configuration. It opens it directly. Most of the time it takes a few seconds. You always see that if you do it live that it takes a little bit longer. I'm gonna wait for 5 more seconds, and otherwise I'll come back in a second here. I'm gonna come back here in a second to show it. So the last part of this session was to inspire you with something that I experienced. While I was building the extension, I had to test it with a lot of different configurations. Now, and I run into this topic on GitHub. Here are a lot of Home Assistant configurations to explore, and I have seen a lot of them, and I believe it's super cool to look into these repositories because you get a lot of inspiration on how people structure their data. So if you get stuck because you believe it's kind of, you get big files or it clutters, then I would encourage you to look into, for example, Gala's repository. He has a lot of his hardware and configurations documented, and I actually bought a lot of devices while discovering repositories like this. Another great example is Frank's configuration. He has it broken up by integrations, for example, but he also has his automation split by areas within his house. So definitely check it out if you need kind of inspiration on how to structure your YAML files. And let's see in the meantime if this code space has already been started. It hasn't. It would be cool. Let me give it 1 more second. Connecting. Something seems to happen now. Is it here already? No. That's unfortunate. I mean, like, I would have loved to show this to you. I guess there's a reason it's still in private preview or in preview at GitHub as well. The experience is going to be much similar to what you see here. So you're going to have a Visual Studio Code web-based experience. You're going to be able to work with your source control, of course, and the extension can be installed and it can also be connected towards Home Assistant. Yeah, that's poor. Anyway, I'm not going to wait for that too much longer. I want to close this off because I have 1 minute left by giving a big shout out to Frank because Frank has helped me out a lot with the Visual Studio Code extension, especially over releases where the schemas of Home Assistant change. There's a lot of work to do there. So thanks, Frank. And I also would like to thank you for all the contributions and the issues. It was really fun building this, so I feel super excited to be part of the Home Assistant community, and yeah, we'll continue to do so for the foreseeable future, of course. Thank you for sticking with me. I'm sorry about the code spaces. I'm pretty sure that GitHub releases this feature very soon, and then you can try it out yourself. There shouldn't be any barrier in trying. So yeah, enjoy tonight. Thanks.